So welcome everyone.
You know,
This is Tough Talk Testimony Tuesday. We're live, 5:35, slightly late, but we have a fantastic guest. We are so excited to have her on. Her name is Susie Flashman Javis. We first heard her a couple of weeks ago when we were working with Emma on the recovery course of 12 Steps. She gave such a powerful testimony. And I remember saying to her, and I think both of our jaws dropped, and it was a synchronized, we must get on the Tough Talk Testimony Tuesday. So welcome, Susie.
thank you very much. Good to be here. Thank you.
We are so excited to have you. I've got some questions already, but before we go into the questions, just give us an overview of what you're doing now. I know you're an author of a couple of books now. Are you also an executive speaker or executive? What sort of role are you doing there? Just share with people.
So I work with leaders, senior leaders, lawyers, people who own businesses as an executive coach and as a counsellor. So I do a bit of a mix of therapy and coaching together, working with people who run their own businesses or people who are within like the corporate world, working with them. And I do therapy as well with all sorts of people, and it's all on Zoom now.
Wow. Yeah. And that is quite diverse, isn't it? So you work with executive people on one hand.
Yeah.
On the other hand,
sorts of people.
Brilliant.
And I'm a trained trauma therapist, and I work with couples and.
We got some feedback coming there, Joe.
Yeah, that's okay. That was
like
me.
Radio or something.
That's all right.
Yeah, carry on, Susie. So
so I've got two books. Go on. Yeah, two books.
Let's have a look at them then.
This one's called At Therapy's End.
Right.
I'm an ambassador for a charity called Restored Relationships, which is trying to end violence against women. I've done a lot of work with domestic abuse. And this is about a woman who grows up with domestic abuse. And this is my autobiography, which is called Potholes and Belly Flops. That's a picture of me back in the day.
Potholes and belly flops. So that is really your testimony book, is it, Susie?
That is, yeah. That is. That's why I end up. The reason I do these talks in the end is because that book came out.
Right.
And the reason that book came out, I'll tell you in a minute. But yeah.
So the book came before you were doing your testimony.
The book did. I mean, people knew about my story, but not really. I didn't really get booked to speak at places. You know, I did quite a lot of men's breakfast, women's breakfast, church kind of events. You know, it always makes me laugh that I've become the keynote speaker. I'm like, just a laugh. But that really kind of shoehorned me, if you like, into it. But that's been out about 5 or 6 years now. So.
Wow. So if someone wants to get hold of your books, how do they do that?
They can go on my website, which is www.thebespokecoach.com. So that's THEBESPOKE coach, COACH.com. And you can go through that, and there's a books page in that. Or if you don't want to know anything about it, you can just go to Amazon, look it up, buy it.
Go to Amazon as well. I mean, after you hear Susie's story, I think you're going to want to read the story.
I think people are definitely going to want to read this one.
I think it's the sort of story, Joe, that you can pass on to other people.
Yeah. Well, just to let you know, we've got somebody watching from Redding, California, studying at Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry. It's absolutely on fire for Jesus and such an opportunity. Nicholas James Buchanan, awesome. Looking forward to this. Shalom. Who are you interviewing? Guy for me to pass on. Okay. Shalom. Did you not see Susie Flashman Javis? You can hear her story in a second. Just sharing support tool, but Women's Aid Now, Girls in Refuge watching. Awesome.
That's brilliant, because that's why I work in. I set up counselling in a refuge, actually.
Really?
I've worked a lot with domestic abuse. One of the things I'm really passionate about, ending violence against women. Do you know it's 1 in 4 in the church?
Is it really?
1 in 4.
Oh my days!
In the church, can you believe that stat? That's like,
wow,
it's incredible. That is incredible, isn't it?
Something we need to pray about, isn't it?
For sure.
So Joe, come on. Let's get Susie's story.
So Susie, people will be wondering, what is this lovely lady that is just sitting there radiant? What's so special that she's on Tough Talk Testimony Tuesday? Has she got a Tough Talk message for us? They must be thinking. And wait until you hear some of this. What we'll do is we're going to go backwards and forwards with Susie because it just makes it easier. We want to interact with you guys and girls that are watching as well. So get your comments on there. So Susie, just in a nutshell, before we go right into it from the beginning, what were you before you were an executive speaker and a therapist and everything else in your day?
Okay, so I'll give you the worst place I was.
Go for it.
I was a heavily addicted heroin addict.
Wow.
I lived in a flat in Deptford and I was stick thin. I shuffled around Deptford in my old man's herringbone coat and lived on curry sauce and chips. I funded my habit by stealing of a prolific shoplifter. I gave my body away. It's funny doing it this way around, actually, because it's like backwards, but it's quite interesting. I gave my body away for my drugs. I married my dealer.
Wow.
Because I got pregnant. And then I lost the baby because my womb was not a safe place to be as a heroin addict. In fact, I spoke at an event recently and I said, I read an interactive letter to myself, back to my younger self. And I read a letter and said, you don't know this, but you will kill your baby. And it suddenly struck me that that's what I'd done because I just carried on using. I just carried on using because all I could think about was, how will I feed this addiction? And it didn't even occur to me to kind of save the life of my unborn child.
So take us now we've got a flavour, is probably not the right word, but you know what I'm saying, of what went wrong. Take us back all the way to the beginning. What sort of childhood did you have? Was it trouble? Was it a good environment? Just share a little bit about that with us if you can, and the people watching.
Sure. So I grew up in a kind of middle class family that moved out of London down to Kent in search for a better life. Grew up in a Christian family. I was the eldest of 3 children. I'm a girl of the 50s. I was born up with bread vans delivering and greengrocers and mobile libraries and all that kind of stuff, polishing the doorstep with a traditional kind of background. I often read this beautiful excerpt from Housekeeping magazine, and it talks about what women have to do about clearing away the clutter, my BBC voice coming out now, and making the house quiet, and washing the children's little faces, and making yourself making the house warm and comfortable for your husband. And the line of it says, a good wife knows her place. That's from 1955. And I
remember seeing a Harry Enfield sketch, and that used to finish with women, know your place.
Well, exactly. And that is the kind of world I grew up in. That's the family I was part of. My father was quite a kind of angry, creative man, but he was stroppy. And my mother was kind of like, did what he said. And I was like, I can't deal with this stuff. So I grew up with a mum who'd pray out in the hallway for us in our separate bedrooms at night, was taken to church, went to church on a Sunday afternoon, was raised to know that Jesus loved me, but had a dad who was violent to me, and also stuff went on that was really difficult, and no one could protect me, no one could save me. And I grew up thinking, this don't fit, this is hypocritical, and children and young people hate hypocrites. So I grew up angry at my father, really angry at my mum for not sticking up for me or sticking up for herself. And then I'd gone to various schools for various reasons, and then I was in this school, and I was in the top class of this school, but I was like a typical bored middle class kid, and we would flog our dinner tickets, go up the shops, nick our lunch, and buy cannabis with the money. So we started smoking drugs at about, 14, sitting on a gate, getting stoned, coming back into school stoned and doing that stuff. But in that time, the trouble with some drugs and some people is it escalates stuff. So, started off smoking a bit of puff, and then, there was lots of amphetamine, speed around, there was LSD. Those were the kind of drugs that we got involved with through that time.
And this is the late 60s? early 70s?
Oh, dude, so lovely, Joe. Yeah, let's pretend it was then. Because I'm way older than that. But anyway, let's pretend
Okay.
then.
So, but Susie, you were still at school, you're saying, when all this started?
I was at school,
Wow.
yeah. I mean,
So it started very young.
do you know what's really funny? This is what I truly believe this. This will sound absolutely mad to everybody. God has given me an extra decade. Because I really think that what God does, he does repay the years the locusts have eaten. So imagine there's this household like this, and I leave home age 19, and I travel to India with my boyfriend. In fact, the book was going to be called The Pressure Cooker, because when I left home at 19, a week before my 19th birthday, my dad disowned me and my mother bought me a pressure cooker. So I wanted to call this book The Pressure Cooker, but they're like,
right.
well, people think it's a book of recipes, but actually they don't even know what potholes and belly flops mean. So
No, I'm trying to figure it all out, but yeah.
Yeah, so it wouldn't have made any difference. Anyway, came back and got a job in the newly formed job centres. So I was in there being a clerical assistant. I'm so not officey person, but they had a photographer come in to do some pictures, and they asked me if I'd stand and pretend to be someone unemployed looking for a job. So I did that, and then I thought, oh, maybe I'll take some pictures of me, because I was like 5'8", I was pretty skinny, didn't look too bad. Had all my hair hacked off by someone because I was going to India traveling, and this guy said, "Joel, I'll take some pictures of you." So I met this guy, went out. At some stage after that time, went out, sat on this gate where he's taking pictures of me. I'm in my little cheesecloth top and my typical hippie cheesecloth skirt and stuff. And then he just goes, "Well, take your top off, love." Look, so I'm 19. I am beautiful. I don't think it then. Remember, I really don't think. I think it now looking back. And I think it looking back like 30 years ago, I would say it was as well. But so I just did take my top off. So I end up with this portfolio of black and white pictures of me with no top on. And the only thing you can do that is take it to an agency that does topless work. So I end up going to this agency in London. And before I know it, I'm on page 3 of the Sun. I'm in News of the World. I'm in the Daily Mirror. I'm doing all this stuff. I'm traveling to the Maldives, doing some work for a German magazine. I'm doing all this stuff until I meet this photographer who's doing a commercial. And he said to me, "Susie, change your agent." So I changed my agent. He said, "Because you're going to get, this is all your work you're going to do is this." So changed my agent. And then suddenly I'm the face of De Beers Diamonds on commercials. I'm on the covers of all these young teenage magazines. I'm doing catalogue trips. I'm doing, going to San Diego with Leslie Ash, filming for Harmony Hairspray. Is she or isn't she wearing Harmony Hairspray? I'm doing all these different commercials. I live in Amsterdam. I live in Japan. I'm traveling all over the world doing all this stuff, and I'm doing really, really well. Now, if this was me in a room with you, I'd be going, but over here is the girl that's living this double life.
Yeah, so I was going to say, so just going back, so for those that have just joined, we've just heard from Susie. She was just sharing with us that she ended up being a heroin addict, but prior to that, she got involved in photography. Some guy took some pictures of her, thinking it was very normal. They then asked her to take her top off, and before she knows it, she's on page 3, the Mirror. She's all over the place, getting flown all over the world. So that's just a bit of a recap. So now, one question I've got to ask you, Susie, is at that stage, when you took your top off and then you started taking pictures, was there any thought that, do you know what, this isn't right? I was brought up a Christian. Did any of that fly around your mind, or was it such a case of, I'm such in the limelight here, everyone wants me, to put me in their magazines and everything? Was there any struggle at that stage?
The only struggle for me was, in all honesty, is that my dad might have found out he was in advertising.
Right.
My mother, who worked for a local rag. So that was the biggest problem. And of course they did. My granddad was a typical Londoner with a flat cap and a silk scarf. And he used to drink his tea out of his saucer and say, "You silly moo, what are you doing?" He rang my mum up and went, Here, June, Sue's in the paper. And my mum's, "Oh, is she? Oh, lovely." And he goes, "Yeah, on page 3. And so that's how they find out.
That's how they found out.
Oh my days. Days.
And so yes, I thought that, but I didn't think anything more of it. I think I thought, well, that's obviously all I can do. Like, I sold myself short thinking, Well, obviously you can't go and model clothes or beauty or anything. But
so even at this stage, you didn't have a good view of your own body. You're insecure in your own looks, and yet the media's just gone crazy for you and wanted you on all, on magazines, Page 3, TV.
I look really young. I look really young, and men liked it. I suppose. And it's complicated, isn't it?
Yeah,
but
of course.
But I didn't do it. I never took what was very interesting is the amount of time I spent modelling and the amount of time I was naked or doing, because it was topless stuff. I wasn't doing full frontal, penthouse, whatever. But nonetheless, that stuff, I was only doing that for about 6 months. The rest of the time, I was doing all this other stuff. But this is the stuff that stuff is also why the book's written, not because I'm a De Beers Diamond model or anything, face of De Beers Diamond. So
Susie, you were saying you almost was living a double life.
Yeah.
Take us to that. What was happening?
So I am this successful model, but I'm living with various people. So like I said, I moved out when I was 19. I lived with this guy for a couple of years. But on my first trip to the Maldives was the first time I was unfaithful to him. And every trip I did, I was unfaithful again. So I would be having all these kind of sexual relationships with people, models that I met or whatever, and I just was not faithful. And when that ended, that relationship ended, I moved in with somebody else, and then somebody else and somebody else. And every single relationship I moved out on to a new person with, my drugs got worse. So I sampled heroin when I was about 19, and then that didn't happen. Then I didn't do anything with it, but then I moved in with the guy who gave me the heroin, and that built it a bit more. So I'm looking amazing. I'm doing this work, but I'm starting to build a habit.
And was that normal in that industry back then? Was it, or was you a bit out there? No,
I didn't. So I never hung out with all the kind of actors and the models and the directors. I didn't do that because for some reason I'd go home to this bloke I was living with, who I thought I loved, to that life of my drugs. And always had this limiting belief that it's what I could have. It's what I kind of, I don't know, deserve maybe. I don't know.
And obviously after a while the drugs are going to start to have an effect, aren't they? Well,
they do. I lived in Japan for about 6 months. And that was a great time. And I stopped taking so much drugs then, but I started drinking more in Japan, because often you replace an addiction with another addiction, right?
Yeah.
And I put on a bit of weight. But when I say I put on a bit of weight, I mean
pound.
Because ridiculous, because I was shapely and I was slightly shaped. Yeah, it was pathetic, but I was told I put on a bit of weight, but I still was very, very popular out there, did loads of stuff out there. And that I came off my drugs a little bit there, but when I came back, I was straight back on it because I was still in relationship with this other man I was living with, even though I was being really promiscuous out there. But none of the other models that I met were like me. They just weren't like me. I was like this kind of wild child. And some people have asked me, is it because of the stuff that happened when you were a child? And I think when things happen to you when you're in your formative years as a teenager, your brain is being re-hardwired, and I think I just had a view of myself that was like, you're not worth much.
Wow. Yeah, we hear a lot of that. We were interviewing somebody, a guy called Matthew Gretsch from X Out Loud, and he was sharing the same sort of things. That he had a difficult upbringing, and you do hear it a lot. Those that come from broken homes or troubled upbringing or abused, that it does certainly change or shape your identity, I think, as you get older, for sure. So, wow.
Yeah.
So what sort of period are we talking? So really, at the moment, it seems like a whirlwind of fame and fortune and everything else, and within like a 12-month period so far, because you sort of said at the age of.
Well, if you think I started at 19, I stopped when I was about 27. In that time. But from 19 to 21, it wasn't too bad. I was still smoking and stuff, messing about. Was being promiscuous, but wasn't on the hard drug. But from 21 onwards, it just got worse and worse and worse. And I start to lose work because I'm looking like a flipping junkie. Well, I am a junkie.
So were you sort of seen as a bit of a toxic person at this stage then when you hit 27? Were people recognising that you were struggling and they didn't want anything to do with you? How did that play out, Susie?
I think in the modelling world, you have to look a certain way, and you need to be beautiful. You need to be, but you look healthy. I wasn't healthy. I was a drug addict. It gradually just got worse and worse and worse until I was unemployed.
Gotcha.
And I suppose sometimes we have to sink super low before we go, I need your help, God. And I literally was the person, in the end, not without any work, we were selling drugs to feed our habits, the dealer and I, the one who I lost the baby. And we were doing things like we couldn't afford cigarettes. And sometimes we do a homeless hostel thing in our church. And I say to the guys out, or girls, I'll buy you cigarettes, please, because I sometimes see them trying to make a cigarette out of old dog ends, and I would do that. I had nicotine running up my hand. I'd be like,
wow,
nodding off. We were scraping barbs off needles and reusing them.
Wow.
We were re-soaking the flipping cotton wool that you put in a spoon to suck up your heroin and, reusing that, trying to get everything out. I was such a wreck. One day I had a pearl ring given to me by my granddad, who used to belong to my nan. I took it around the dealer overnight, waiting for my gyro. That's what you used to get when you're unemployed.
Yeah,
gyro, right?
I remember.
And they got busted that night, and I never got that ring back. And I was always so ashamed of that. But this is the thing, right? God is not in the business of leaving you in that place. And he didn't leave me. And any of you people watching, if you're in that kind of desperate place, he's not in the business of abandoning you in that place. He's in the business of going, do you want me to help you? Just ask me. And that in the end is what happened to me.
Well, that leads nicely on to my next question, and this is one that my wife has asked to ask you. When did you realise that your lifestyle needed to change? And what made you come to this decision?
Well, I was a Christian. I've been baptised when I was 17. I was baptised. I knew that God loved me. I could never hear him, and I couldn't pray out loud or anything, but I knew he loved me. The thing that brought me to the end of it is the opening page of this book, where my publisher says you need to have something that grips your reader. And it tells the story of me going to a dealer in Woolwich and with no money and unaware of what I was going to have to do to get my drugs. And I'm going into this place and walking into a bedroom with him and him sitting on the bed. And I describe him like this large Buddha-like person sitting on the bed without his top on. And I had no idea what he was going to say. And he said, you can have some if you can find a vein for me. You might find one in my chest. So I literally rummaged around on his chest and gave him his fix of heroin in his chest. And then I thought, do you know what? I might as well be a prostitute. I might as well be a prostitute. And that point was one of my lowest points. That and 12 days after being married to my drug dealer husband, having sex on the floor of that flat when he was out for more drugs. It's like how low you're going to sink, Susie. How low?
Yeah. Yeah. So in a way, you were acting in a prostitution type role.
Yeah.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's
true. It's true. I was giving my body away for drugs, and I think about that. And you said to me, "Can you come and do this show?" And you're like, because you don't look like someone who ever did that. Whenever I tell my story, they go, "Really? Are you sure?" But this, look,
it's quite funny, yeah. Susie. I remember when I heard your story before, and I was like, "Oh, I wonder what she's, her story is." I thought, you look like you've been a school teacher in your life. So when you started your story, I was like,
wow. I
was like, Joe, come here and listen to this story. It was like, this is an incredible story. And to be honest with you, I think it takes an incredible amount of guts to share that, particularly as a lady, to share all that and be honest with all that. It's
yeah, but the thing is, right, I really believe in authenticity. I think rock up and be yourself. How do you expect other people to rock up and be the same with you? That's what in my work, I rock up, I am myself. I am friendly and warm and funny and all the things that I am being here, because that's what I think how we're meant to be. And
No, you're right.
and I also, so let me just tell you how God healed me.
Come on.
So one day I'm around a friend's house, and I'm sitting on her bed, and I pulled a Bible off her shelf, and I pulled out this Bible, and I kind of opened up. Christians do this. Any of you who are not Christians, they do this quite a lot. They go like that, and they go, and then they read whatever it is, hoping it's the verse of the day. I don't know why we do that, but sometimes people do that. Anyway, I did the same kind of thing, but when I opened up the Bible, the room turned white, and I kind of knew God's presence in the room. And I turned to Psalm 32, and in Psalm 32 it says, "What joy for those whose sins are forgiven," and it talks about confessing your sins to God. And it goes on, it says, do not be like a horse or mule that needs bit and bridle to control it. And it said, all day long your hand was heavy on me, and my strength was sapped as in the heat of summer. And I'm like, oh my life, the Bible's written in English. I mean, but what I mean was, it's my life. I am reading my life here. And I was like, okay, God, that's it. Can you help me? And that was that. And I left the room, and I told my mate, who I was staying with, who's not a Christian, who I'm still friends with and I still see. And I said to her what had happened. She was like, oh, Suze, if I could just take away the pain of it all, you could just deal with all the mental stuff, couldn't you?
Wow.
Never say anything like that, right? Where God can hear you. That means anywhere, right?
Yeah,
then,
absolutely.
That's exactly what happened. She takes all the pain, and I don't get any withdrawals, and I don't take heroin again. And I left the husband, and I moved down to Kent, and I never took heroin again. Now, when I say I never took heroin again, don't get me wrong, I wasn't squeaky clean. I still smoked puff. I was still a bit promiscuous, but I never took Class A drugs again. And God did this thing, and he just took it.
So no heavy withdrawal, no
withdrawals. No.
And so anyone who's had that kind of addiction would know that's almost just impossible, isn't it?
It's just like...
It was a God intervention. That put words into your mouth. It just sounds like God has just met you where you're at, and just in his grace and mercy, just cleaned you up.
I mean, sometimes
you're still struggling.
It's the end
for sure.
That's the truth, isn't it? It's when you think you can't do it. I said to you, so for the audience, I turned up here today. I went, I've had the crappiest day possible. I have been so stressed. And they literally came and said, this is what my day's been like. Usually I'm praying, can you give me a word, Lord, for tonight? I've been so stressed, I haven't been able to do that. But, this is the thing. He takes us where we are and meets us where we are. And that's what, in that day, he met me where I was. Now, I've got friends down here who've been friends with me for donkey's years where I live now. And they're like, you used to say, oh, I think I'll go back up to London for a visit. And we go, oh, no, we're throwing a party. You can't go. And I had no idea. They were throwing parties to keep me here. So I didn't go back and try and do the old drugs again.
Right.
Like, isn't that amazing? I mean, I was taking drugs with them, but I wasn't taking any Class A drugs. But so it's like, wow, God.
It's awesome. So we've got some comments just coming in. Let me just... Jonathan Bryce, he was the guy that led me to the Lord. This is awesome. I love him so much. That's powerful. He said, thanks for your honesty, Susie. You are such a courageous person. Thank you. Bless you. So, and I think Jonathan is currently in Colorado, I think, unless he's come back to the UK. Alison Buchanan, I can't type fast enough to catch each point I want to comment on. This is a great testimony. Sharon, love when people are totally honest but can still laugh at the mistakes they made. And Shalom, tell Susie, one of my sisters in Women's Aid got baptised the other day.
So cool. That is so cool. And sometimes that we all doubt, right? Sometimes I'm like, oh, Lord, what do I believe? Did you heal me? What's going on? I've had a really difficult few months and stuff thinking about his stuff. And then I remember the times when he's spoken to me, and he's spoken to me so directly that I've done stuff. And so let me just tell you a little story. We are going back and forth, but it doesn't matter.
It's good.
But I remember speaking at his church in Streatham, and on the way back, we were starving, so we went into McDonald's like you would when you're starving, and it was heaving with people. And I've just been talking about my book and everything, this one, not the other one, this one. And So we're sitting there in the corner on this little circle table, me and my husband, and I hear God start to talk to me in my head. So this is what I do. I have conversation with God in my head, and he goes, "Go and give that book to that woman." And I'm like, "It's heathen here, Lord. What woman?" And he's going, "You know which woman?" I'm going, "No, I don't." I'm arguing with God, and I don't know what you're talking about. And yet I know. I knew it was this woman. So I don't tell my husband, because he'd go, "Don't you do anything embarrassing." It would be like that. So I'm like, "Can you go and get the car? It's raining." And I do this so pathetic, "Get the car for me." So he goes to get us a car. I say, "I'll meet you outside when you got the car." And I go out and I walk past the school, and I hand her this book and I walk on. So when I'm looking in the window, she's like looking at his book like this. I'm like, "Oh, okay." And about 3 weeks later, I get his phone call going, "It's me from McDonald's." I'm like, "Oh, wow." She said, "I hope you don't mind." I looked you up on Google. I'm like, "No, that's fine." Thinking she knows everything about me now. And she said, "Why should he give me the book?" And I said, "Well, because God told me to. Tell me about you." She said, "I have 3 brothers. They all died of heroin overdoses."
Oh, wow.
And I thought, oh my life. And this woman was trying to go to church. I lost contact with her because I think she had a pay-as-you-go phone, and I lost numbers and stuff with her. But God, he told me to do that. And when I'm in those times when I think, "Oh, really? Is it true? Are you speaking to me?" I think of moments like that, and I go, "Yeah, you did that. You flipping did that." I was on a train to Cardiff one day, and I could hear this bloke stumbling down the aisle of the train, and I'm going, "Please don't let anyone sit next to me, God, please." And of course, he falls in the seat next to me, and I go, "He's a heroin addict." I just know he's heroin. I can see his hands all puffy, and I'm like, "He's a heroin addict." And he kind of leans across me and plugs his phone in. I'm like, "Oh, please, God." And then, so I'm sitting there, and I turn to look at him, and I go, "You're a heroin addict, aren't you?" And he goes, "What? How do you know?" I go, "I used to be one." So I proceed just to tell him my story on this train, and there's this couple watching forward, and there's these people behind us, and I'm trying not to be loud, because you don't tell someone they're heroin addicts. And he tells me his story, how he's lost his kid, and I tell him about this, that, and the other, and anyway, we talk about him getting clean, and he, I just do that. We have this exchange, and then he gets off in Cardiff, and this couple are sitting opposite, and they go, "What's your book called?" And I'm like, "Oh." So then I tell them, and I get an email from them later going, "It was so amazing watching you talk, because we're Christians, and we don't talk about it." And I'm like, and I'm not telling you this to tell you that I'm great, because I'm seriously not. Today, I refuse to let my son come home, even though he's homeless. Why do I wasn't going to tell you that, but now I have.
But there was obviously a reason. There's obviously reasons.
There is a reason, but nonetheless, what I'm saying is, I'm sorted. He's actually not homeless. He's still somewhere at the minute, but he's about to be. What I'm saying to you, I don't want to say I've got it all sorted, because I really believe we have this. God loves us, but we grow the fruit. We grow the fruit of Him, that are like Him.
Yeah.
And God does what He restores things.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're called Tough Talk because life is tough, not because we got it in order. Either way, sorry to take your line there, brother, but I know that's one of yours, but it's a tough message, right? I often describe it like it's like, when we come to Christ, we're like a big lump of clay, and he starts cutting away the big issues, and then he starts to mold us over time, as we give into the Holy Spirit, or as we reduce and surrender, the more God works in our lives. But that's a whole process.
It is really fascinating, isn't it, that the things that we believe about ourselves that are so negative. So remember the ring. So I'm a mother of 4 kids. I've got 3 children that I gave birth to, 3 daughters, and a son that we adopted. And we adopted him when I was 40, because God told me that I was going to have a son, and then I gave birth to Holly, and I'm like, "Oh, Holly, I've been calling you Max." I can't be hearing God right. And then this newspaper came through the door, a free newspaper about children in need of love, children of drug addicts and alcoholics. And I was like, "Oh, I could then explain it. We could adopt a child, and then I could explain why they couldn't, and I could pay God back," kind of thing, doing this stuff. And God's like, "You can't pay me back. It's free." So we do adopt a child, my son Lewis, but he wasn't a drug addict child. He wasn't those things. And so when I'm 40, remember I told you about the ring? Normally I would have something to show you, but I haven't got this on. But and when I was 40, my mother gave me this box. It was a ring box, and inside was a ring that was exactly the same as the one, her mother's one, that I'd given away, and she didn't know.
Wow.
It was like, so my son's middle name is Joel, because God replays the years, the locusts have eaten.
Amen.
He gave me someone else's child to raise up my home, raise as my own, and to love and to cherish and to give tough love to say, I can't always save you, which I've done.
Which is kind of what you're doing today, it sounds.
Really hard. But I wanted just to tell you why this. I don't know how much time we've got, but I wanted to tell you why I wrote this.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it. It's all yours.
So I'm married. I've got 3 kids. I've got 4 kids, and I was running a preschool, and God challenged me about training as a therapist, and that's a bit of a joke. He's going, well, you're going to be a therapist because you kind of talk so much, right? But actually, I turned out to be quite a good counsellor. But I'm working in this Christian charity at the time. And I walk in one day and someone tells me they found me. And I'm like, yeah, here I am. She went, no, on the internet. I'm like, right. And then there's all these pictures, page 3 pictures, other pictures I've not seen before, all pointing towards hardcore porn sites. And I'm like, oh no, because I've got a conviction for heroin possession from years back. But this, I was like, no, this is too much shame. I had a daughter the same age as I was when I was appearing in the newspaper, and I was like, oh no, I can't do this. And someone said to me, you can either sink under it, or you give it to God. And in Romans 12, it says in the beginning of this book of the Bible called Romans, it says in the first verse of Romans 12, it says, offer your body as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. It's your reasonable act of worship. So then I wrote the book. And I said to God, you can have it all, warts and all, and I'll talk about anything you want me to talk about. And the latest thing, over the past few years, he challenged me about I was driving down to Ashford one day, and he said, I want you to talk about pornography. And I'm like, what, really? And I went into this church, and I stood at the front of this church, and I always tell it like this. I say, I stood in front of these men, we'd all had breakfast together. I'm the only woman in the building, 50 blokes, right? And I stand there, and I feel like I'm on the top solid board of a diving board, and I'm about to triple flip, and I go, okay, so I think God wants me to talk about porn. Can you hear that? Listen, you could have heard a pin drop. And they went, do it. And God has said to me, right, I want you to talk about porn because I want you to get men to talk about porn to each other, because the stats, as I said previously to you, porn addiction is like domestic abuse. 1 in 4 in the church. The addiction to pornography in the church is rife. And he said to me, I'm going to give you a baton, Susie, not a burden, a baton. Take the baton and give it to the men in the church and say, talk about porn. Talk about how it affects neural pathways in your brain. And it's exactly the same addiction as a class A drug.
Wow.
And it builds and builds until you're looking at stuff that gets you banged up. It's just, and so that's what I do. So that little book gives me permission.
Susie, you've been fantastic so far. Very quickly though, you kind of left me in a place where you were still smoking the cannabis and you was doing all that stuff. Obviously God dealt with you stage by stage, didn't he? I mean, was there a moment you had baptism and it all kind of made sense to you, Christianity and everything was out, or is it?
I think so when I got back, when I left my first husband, remember, I got back, came down here where I live now, and met a bloke who was a motorbike courier.
Right.
Got pregnant, like you do. Said, well, I'm keeping this child, whatever you think. And my husband says, well, I did the right thing. I drank a bottle of whiskey, said I'd stay. So he stayed. And 6 months pregnant, my sister took me back into a church, a Baptist church. I walked in and I went, oh, it's home. And that church loved me into that church.
Wow.
And accepted me, pregnant and unmarried, because back then it was much more frowned upon, and they and they loved me. I'm still in the same church, and I lead worship and sing and all that stuff. And I'm like, really, God, you do that stuff? And so that's, yes, I'm back. He called me back because he doesn't sow seed and leave it to dry up. If you've asked Jesus into your life at some stage, I don't believe he abandons you to whatever you know, whatever you kind of go to do, because I left and walked a long way away, and there were lots of reasons for that. But he didn't abandon me to it. But it did take me going, can you help me? Could you just please help me?
Yes.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, because it's an incredible story, isn't it? And obviously, to be at the place where you're writing a book and you're counselling, not saying you got your act together, as you just said. You know, we all are in different places every day, but obviously, you're not sitting there at night smoking the weed and drinking.
Well, no, actually, no, that is another story, because when I got pregnant, my husband didn't want to marry me because he'd only just met me. I'd been with him about 6 months. And I was like saying to God, well, I want to be married. And God's like, well, stop smoking drugs then. So I smoked cannabis all through my first pregnancy.
Right.
And I was like, oh, for goodness sake, I've always got to do something else in order to make it happen. So I stopped smoking drugs in the January. No, I can't remember which way around it is. Drugs in the January, cigarettes in the April, and was married in the August. And we've been married 31 years.
Wow.
And I've been faithful to one man.
Wow.
For 31 years. He's lost all his hair because it's stressful living.
We've got to just quickly, just before we end it, we've got some comments coming in. Thank you so much for your transparency, Susan. Thank you, Tough Talk. Alison Buchanan, I hope you're well, Alison. This is hands down my favourite Tough Talk Tuesday. See, that's why we need more women on here. That's brilliant. Jonathan Bryce, what's the book called? So, Jonathan, there's 2 books out. Do you want to just hold them up to the camera, Susie?
Potholes and Belly Flops. And the reason it's called Potholes and Belly Flops, it's about potholing, not about the potholes in the road that wreck your tyre.
Right.
In potholes, you know, I had this picture of God saying, in potholes, if you're going to go pothole, you have to drive straight in and go the way through. But sometimes when we don't do what God says, we keep belly flopping on the surface. But when we go in, the way He says, He provides a handhold that takes you through to the other side.
Right. That's potholing.
Potholes and belly flops.
Yeah, gotcha.
This
Brilliant.
one is At Therapy's End, which is the novel about a woman who writes her story when she's 40 and looks back on her life.
And we can get them through your website and through Amazon.
Go on, have a look at the website, because you never know, you might want to work with me. Thebespokecoach.com. So it's THE, thebespokecoach.com. All one word.
We want to do that, and I want to get definitely want to get a copy of that book, Joe. That's fantastic. Listen, Susie, there's people that may be listening to this and they've enjoyed or were amazed by your story, but maybe they're not in that place. Maybe they're in a place of a bit of a desperation themselves, or they're crying out and they want they need God. They've got that recognition of God, and we kind of like to ask our guests to literally say a prayer at the end. And so I would like to do that. If you have been listening to Susie's story and know that, you know, things aren't maybe right, there's an emptiness inside your soul and you need Jesus Christ. I believe the wages of sin is death. The gift of God is eternal life. I believe Jesus died on the cross, shed his blood that we may have peace with God. When you have peace with God, other things start to take place. As Susie said, she made that prayer and it was a progressive stages. I mean, to come off heroin like that, but yet still carrying on with the cannabis and different things. But, you know, whatever stage you're at tonight, we want Susie to pray for you. If you know that Susie's been speaking to you directly, we would love it if you would just take this moment and focus on God and get right with him, call out to him. So if that is you, Susie, would you pray for anyone who's listening that's just resonated with your story, listen to this, and they just know that they need more of God, they need God to transform them. Could you do that for us? And then we'll say our goodbyes.
Yeah. Father, thank you that you know every single person right here, right now, on this screen, watching this talk. You know exactly what's going on in their lives. You have not abandoned them. There is nothing they could tell you that would take you by surprise. Tonight, Lord, I would pray, Father, that you would reach into people's lives, that you would give them courage to put a hand up and say, help me, God, I've come to the end of myself. And would you then, Lord, really touch their hearts, whether it's something massive or it's something small, whether it's I have this addiction to alcohol, or whether it's I need to be brave and leave, or whether it's help me, God, to step out and be the woman or man you want me to be. I pray, Lord, that you would pour your freedom, your release, and your healing, Lord. on everybody who's listening. And I pray in the power of your name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Oh, Joe, that has been amazing. It's been so powerful.
It's awesome.
It's been a different testimony we would normally have, and that has been great. We've been, I want to get that book. I want to get that book and give it out. So I would encourage you guys, get hold of that book and not only read it for yourselves, but pass it on to others. And Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He's able to transform lives. He's able to heal. He's able to set people free. And Susie's a living testimony to that. Susie, we do definitely want to do some other stuff with you. We know that's not going to be the last time, and it's been great, Joe, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Somebody, Alison Buchanan says, "Can Susie come back next week?" Johnny Bryce, so powerful, amazing testimony. So maybe we can, we can get our heads together, maybe get you back on, and maybe share a different, maybe do some, I don't know, give some advice on how to deal with addictions, maybe, because I think you're right. And just to wrap this up, I think you're right, and you definitely with pornography. I mean, my story years ago, I share with Ian, and we got a video out about the trap and how I was heavily addicted to pornography and how that affected me as a very young man. It's so tough. So I think we should definitely get you back to help the guys and girls, give some wisdom in all this stuff. But unless there's anything else, this is Tough Talk Testimony Tuesday.
Please, big clap to Susie. You've been so honest and brave, and thank you very much. Bless you. And really, we're going to continue to pray for you, and we hope the Lord uses you. And definitely, you would be great in prisons, particularly. I think the girls would just,
Here's the thing, right? Here's the prayer request. I really think God wants me to tell my story in the corporates.
Right.
I'm praying for some big gigs that I can get out there and tell the story, because addiction is no respecter of class.
You're absolutely right.
Totally
or gender, or or colour. It's just not. It just is.
Just sometimes when you got more money, you can feed it a little bit longer without it.
That's the problem, isn't it? That is the problem. So that's my
definitely. Well, guys, if you've listened to Susie, please always keep her in her prayers as well. Check her website, get her book, and we're looking forward to doing some other stuff for you, Susie. And again, you're doing some stuff with Emma down at Restore.
Yeah, that's the other thing, actually. So I run the women's group on the recovery course.
Recovery course,
and that started last week. So you can find out about that on Recovery 2, Recovery, and then write out twa.org possibly. And if you've got an addiction and you want to, that's a 12-step program, and it's really good.
It's really good.
It's
really good. So we do encourage that, don't we? So please check those.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Susie. Bless you. Hang on there. We're going to end the video, but we just want to finish off. Don't click off just yet. We want to have a quick chat with you. So.
All right. We love you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Shalom, everyone else. Johnny B, Alison, the lot of you, Sharon. We love you guys. Keep praying for us, and we'll be back hopefully next Tuesday with another Tough Talk Testimony Tuesday. So God bless. We love you. Keep preaching the gospel. Heaven and hell are real, but the gift of God is eternal life in Jesus Christ. God bless you all. Love you all.